for the country's highest court to overrule something considered one of its landmark decisions.
Fox's Shannon Brame reports a decision from the justices isn't likely until June. Senate Majority Leader Schumer says he plans to bring the president's multi-trillion-dollar social spending plan up for a Senate vote the week after next. Senate GOP Leader McConnell says most Americans don't want it.
2 in 3 Americans want Washington Democrats to step back from the precipice. An overwhelming consensus. But a few loud voices on the far left are yelling at Democrats to ignore the people and take the plunge.
Congress has until Friday night to extend the government's spending authority or face a possible government shutdown. An Alabama sheriff's deputy shot to death Wednesday in the town of Yellow Bluff, midway between Mobile and Montgomery. Deputy Madison Nicholson was responding to a domestic dispute when he was shot in the neck. Another deputy was wounded. The suspect is also dead. Missouri St. Louis County Police Detective Antonio Valentine was killed Wednesday when a suspect in a drug investigation rammed his police vehicle head-on. Another officer was hurt. Major League Baseball's collective bargaining agreement with its players has expired. Owners expected to lock out the players for baseball's first work stoppage since 1994. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Santa's come in and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 3.99% and up to $50,000. And with the new Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas Loan contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier this year. Equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Hey, let's go to Tango Theaters and watch a movie.
No way, I'm broke. How am I gonna buy snacks?
They have a combo special for the whole month of November called the G's for Giving Combo Specials. You can choose from 2 combos for just $13.75. G Combo 1 with a drink, popcorn, and candy, or G Combo 2 with a drink, hot dog, and chips.
Wow, okay, that sounds good.
A portion of the proceeds will be donated to the UOG Endowment Foundations for scholarships and programs.
Cool, it'll be my treat. I'll buy 2 combos.
Visit Tango Theaters and grab yourself a G Combo special during the whole month of November.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A good way to start a radio program, Jose, when that radio program is oriented towards the United States Constitution, American values, conservatism, and a little bit of libertarianism mixed in. So that's the reason I start the show that way every day. We go from there straight to Zemi Ikotny. Both newspapers have seemed to developed a very mild approach to the editorials on that they're running in their papers, like the one that ran a few days ago that said, "Look both ways before you cross the street. Don't pull away from the curb unless your seatbelt is fastened." Really dynamic stuff. Well, we got another one from the Daily News today. Our view look at ways to safely increase spectators at sports events. There was a bright spot for the community over the weekend. The resumption of Guam Football Association youth soccer matches. It was great to see soccer players under the age of 12 being allowed to compete and have fun on the pitch, even if it was in an 8-a-side format on a smaller size pitch with matches set at just 30 minutes in length. Quote, "It felt good to be back because we can run, shoot, and win with our teammates again." Yeah, that came from Rachel San Augustine, a player for the Tumon Typhoons FC. Well, you know, the rest of the editorial is, I don't even want to call it an editorial. It's not exactly what I did on my summer vacation. It's more like what I did the fun I had last weekend. No blue stars in that kind of a performance, guys. And then the Post, still online with the party line here about vaccines. It has taken several weeks between the time Guam sends samples to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the Wuhan virus variant testing and the results to be relayed to the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services. The Omicron variant has not yet been detected on Guam, but we're really anxious for it to get here. However, that doesn't mean Guam doesn't or will not have to in the weeks ahead. And by the time we get confirmation of our first few cases of the Omicron variant, it would likely be weeks too late. In the case of the Delta variant, it had been spreading on Guam for weeks before the results from CDC confirmed the variant was already here and spread into our community. Preemptive measures will be key for Guam to have better outcome than the havoc Delta variant wreaked in lives lost and a number of people who fell ill. The roadblocks need to start sooner. The draconian shutdowns of businesses need to start sooner. We need to discourage all non-essential businesses from even thinking about opening their front doors. Preemptive measures will be key for Guam to have a better outcome than as you were. The government of Guam needs to decide what to do at the points of entry at the airport and seaport soon. The Omicron variant is getting closer to Guam. Japan reported its first case of the Omicron variant Tuesday. The Japan Times reported. The first case was confirmed less than a day after the country imposed sweeping restrictions on inbound travelers, including banning the entry of foreigners, including international students, to prevent the new strain from spreading throughout the country. The 31-year-old Namibian diplomat who had been vaccinated twice was the first Omicron variant case to arrive in Japan. I can just stop right there. That really kind of tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? A 31-year-old Namibian diplomat who had been vaccinated twice was the first Omicron variant case. So, what is it? What is it with the vaccinations? You know, I saw in today's paper that more vaccinated than non-vaccinated were in the hospital. So the vaccination apparently acts in an advisory capacity only. It doesn't prevent the disease. The only positive advantage of having a vaccination, the only thing that I've noticed, and I had to get it because I wanted to go to a hospital in the mainland that would not even talk to you on the phone if you hadn't been vaccinated. So I got it, and the only health benefit is that I can go to Two-Ray on Saturdays now. But I could anyhow because you could eat outside in Two-Ray since last weekend. So whatever advantage I had from getting the vaccine is now over. So we keep talking about this and hyping it. And, you know, there are so many commentators and so many people talking online about what's going on. And on the Ray Gibson show this morning, you heard a famous epidemiologist, Jerry Roberts, opine that a virus wants to continue to survive. That's kind of the nature of all living things. So in order for the virus to survive, it has to tone down its deadliness. Because if you had a virus that would kill every single host within 24 hours of the infection, the virus would end pretty soon because there wouldn't be any hosts for it to infect. So the viruses, and this has been confirmed over the years, tend to become more contagious but less deadly. So the suspicion is that this Omicron virus is going to be a lot easier to catch, but much less serious a disease than what we've been dealing with up until now. Even now, you look at it, and it's just a small fraction of a percent of people that die from the Wuhan virus. It's not a scourge on public health. And there's no way that you can prevent getting it. Getting a vaccination won't do it. Wearing a mask just makes you look stupid. It doesn't help you avoid the disease. Staying 6 feet away from everyone probably saves you a little bit of money on deodorant. Other than that, I don't know what possible good it does. And we've killed our economy. We've put people through all kinds of hell and torture. We've put people out on the street, etc., for a disease that obviously is going to be around as long as the common cold. Somebody this morning said that the Spanish flu is still with us. That the Spanish flu virus still infects people. It just doesn't kill you anymore. You know, you get a little bit sick and that's it. Maybe that's the flu we get the vaccine for every fall. So I have to be really pessimistic about this whole COVID-19 thing. It's a wonderful way for authoritarian governments to take control of their people and start the thought control process. If you're going to go outside, when you get out of bed, you got to put your mask on. I'm going outside, doesn't matter, put your mask on. I'm in my car by myself, put your mask on. So that we pretty soon, probably a large portion of the population identifies people wearing masks as good people. Because it's like the Morgan Freeman commercial that doesn't run anymore. When you wear a mask, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping me too. So it's really gotten out of control. When we had a governor here putting roadblocks out on Marine Corps Drive to combat the disease, after that, I just completely lost faith in anything that she does concerning this whole Wuhan virus. When her director of public health wrote to the Catholic Church saying, you cannot do sacraments in your church. It's just too much. The idea that in order to stop the disease, we want everyone to get vaccinated, a proposition that on its face is valid. If there is a vaccination and it works and everyone is vaccinated, problem solved. But we know that the vaccination, when the nurse sticks the needle in your arm, or depending on who you are, when the governor sticks the needle in your arm, you are not immediately immune from the Wuhan virus. It takes several days. And if it's the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine, according to the folks at Cedars, they don't want to see you until 30 days after the second vaccination. So you're talking about 2 months from the first vaccination. So in order to protect the health of the people here, the governor said, you can't dine inside a restaurant unless you can show a card that says that you've had one of the vaccines. And I've made this argument before a million times. So I could go and get my vaccination at 5 o'clock in the afternoon at Public Health, and I could waltz into Touray at 0700 the next morning. I'd be fine because I had been vaccinated. So you're not setting that rule up for a public health purpose. You're setting it up to coerce people.
And this is how we know. This is straight from, I guess, in a way, from the horse's mouth, that this is all about compliance. The governor is in the States right now, and she is going to places that don't have the same mandates as we do here on Guam. And she's freely taking off her mask. She's not 6 feet away from other people. Yet when she comes back to Guam, she's going to follow her mandates.
Absolutely.
So it's either about the science, or there's no such thing as COVID-19 in the states where she's at.
Yeah. So you could say it's either about disease prevention or about coercion. And when we set up the roadblocks, that was the end of the disease prevention as far as I'm concerned. No matter what kind of an argument came forth, no matter what kind of press release, no matter what kind of scientific lingo, if you'll do that, if you'll stop traffic and have National Guardsmen require people to roll down their window and talk to them, and that's all that happened. They didn't keep any records of how many people went through the roadblocks. That is only about control and coercion. It's not about disease prevention. So that's where we are. So Post, I wish you'd kind of get with it here. You know, you keep playing the party line, and I'm looking for more than that from you, more than just a repetition of the party line. Otherwise, you might want to change the name of your publication from the Guam Daily Post to Pravda. Yeah, Pravda. For you younger folks out there in the audience, Pravda is Russian word for truth. In communist Russia, in Soviet Union times, most important paper in Soviet Union is called Pravda. It's the only truth available. The government tells you so. Pravda. Yeah, so that's kind of what both of them have turned into when it comes to this vaccine BS. Okay, so much for the for the Demi-Cotney. Obviously, there will not be any blue stars today. I have a really abbreviated card today. I'm going to spend a lot of time on national news. This is what I've got for the card. I've got Therese Howe versus Paul Zerzan. This is the great red rice controversy. And I've got Moore Mudge versus GRMC. And then Glencoe versus Kenosha and Waukesha versus Kenosha. I've got more of the left versus Rittenhouse with Jose. Turley on media cartel, Turley on abortion, which I may move up to the top of the calendar. Once again, Turley really lays it out in very clear, even-handed terms, laying out the entire geography of the abortion controversy that's before the Supreme Court now, that went on for oral argument yesterday. Okay, starting the card. Therese Howe versus Paul Zerzan. You'll recall that Paul Zerzan wrote a letter to the editor saying that what we call red rice really isn't red. It's actually orange rice. And Paul, being kind of a stickler for correctness, you know, if it's orange, you should call it orange. You shouldn't call it red. And I just kind of had the idea that when I read it, that perhaps Paul has a horn in his house, and when he was writing this, he was going beep, beep as he went through it. But he riled up he riled up the separatists. Therese Padua Howe from the Daily News came back and really laid it on Paul and said that at the punchline of her column, the only thing Chamorros are more protective of than family is our food. Red rice is red regardless of the reddish-orange hue, said Paula Lujan Kaneni. And earlier in the same news story by Therese Padua Howe, she said that where did I have that here? Where did I? Oh, that was Jim Selman. I'm sorry, it was Jim Selman that talked in terms of cultural appropriation, not Therese Padua. It's interesting that Therese was able to write this without using the words cultural appropriation or cultural insensitivity. Okay, next I've got Mudge versus GRMC. And I was curious as to whether or not Gita had given the requisite public notice in order to have the hearing that they had day before yesterday. Because, as you know, if they didn't, any action they took would be void. So a notice did run in the paper, and it starts out rather strange. It starts out with a header from the Guam Economic Development, but it says on the top, Guam Economic Development Author. That's the top of the notice. It's right here. If you're watching on Facebook, you can read it. Guam Economic Development Author. And then underneath that, it says, Form of Notice of Public Hearing. Now, you would have thought that it would have just said Notice of Public Hearing. But it says Form of Notice of Public Hearing. So the only explanation that I could bring to this is somebody drafts the notice and sends it to somebody else for publication. And the somebody else runs the draft just exactly as it was received. So the draft, whoever the scrivener was, tells the person who's going to publish the notice, Guam Economic Development Authority is the author of this, right? And then here's the form of notice to use. So what appears in the paper? Guam Economic Development Author. Form of Notice of Public Hearing. This is really screwy. I don't know if this is enough to void the action that...
It reminds me of that movie from the 70s, Animal House, where everyone's standing like, go, I state your name, and they go, I state your name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly that kind of a mindset, right? So one would think that when we're talking about $600 million, the sale of half of our hospitals on island here, something this really, really important, that the notice that appeared in the paper would not only be correct, but it would be perfect. This is far from perfect. It's once again kind of setting a tone that makes me, still causes me discomfort with the whole project. Now, we learned a lot yesterday from Peach Grow and even from Utah William, who knew a little bit more about Tefra. I'm going to get into that in a minute.
Is he related to Tennessee William? Utah Williams?
Could very well be, yeah. And then, you know, there's a guy named Tennessee Ernie. Yeah.
I haven't heard of him.
16 tons, number 9 coal. You never heard the song 16 Ton?
I don't think so.
Oh, your musical development has been thwarted.
Is he from West Virginia?
He's Tennessee Ernie, and he is from Bristol. Now, I've been to Bristol a couple times. It's a fascinating place.
Coal mining town?
It's way out in eastern Kentucky. I'm sorry, eastern Tennessee and eastern Virginia. And the main street of Bristol is a state line between Virginia and Tennessee.
There you go.
Yeah. So Tennessee was born in Bristol, Tennessee. Tennessee Ernie was born in Bristol, Tennessee. But if he'd have been born 3 or 4 blocks north, he would have been Virginia Vic. So I don't know about Tennessee Williams, Jose. He may have been from Virginia. So this notice actually tells you more about what happened than any of the news stories. Notice is hereby given that on November 30 at 9 a.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter can be heard.
If you that's called whatever.
Yeah, well, now that could be a valid notice. I've never seen it used in the notice of a Guam meeting before, and is, of course, very lawyer-like. You could call a meeting on November 30, and if you don't finish your business, you can have what's called an adjourned meeting. And you can adjourn that meeting to a date and time certain, and continue on where you were. There are certain new notice requirements. So it looked like this notice contemplated that. Maybe we can't finish it on the 30th. So notice hereby given on November 30th, or as soon thereafter as the matter can be heard, GITA will hold a hearing at the office located, etc., regarding the proposed issuance of bonds of qualified 501c3 bonds as defined in Section 145 of the Internal Code Revenue, as amended for hospital facilities or other healthcare facilities in one or more series, time to time, pursuant to a plan of financing in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $600 million. The public notice is required by Section 147F of the Code. Proceeds of the bond are expected to be loaned to the Blue Continental Healthcare Guam, etc. Part of my notice here is obliterated, so I kind of got to guess what it says. Currently owned by doing business as Guam Regional Medical City, comprising a comprising a hospital bed, acute care hospital, and related improvements. The project will initially be owned by the borrower, the sole corporator of which is Continental Healthcare Network, Inc. Now, who is Continental Healthcare Network, Inc.? And an entity exempt from federal income tax under Section 501c3. So Continental Healthcare Network, Inc. owns BH, what is the name of that? What do they call themselves? Yeah, Blue Continental Healthcare Guam. So a nonprofit now owns GRMC, but the nonprofit is owned by a nonprofit. All interested persons, et cetera, and then the standard boilerplate for every notice. So, as Butch said to Sundance, who are those guys? You know, the only name we've got here is the name of the guy named Mudge that Phil Leon Guerrero was able to dig out of the press releases, I guess. Let's see, Mudge. Gilbert Mudge. Yeah, let's take a short break here. We'll come back to Gilbert Mudge.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, because everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous baby back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Dallas, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life and bigger meals happen here.
Nissan, choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR, 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So Gilbert Mudge is apparently the prime mover behind what is the initials that outfit uses?
BCG?
BCG, yeah. Gilbert Mudge is apparently the prime mover behind BCG. So I suppose in an exercise of mercy, we'll develop a rule here when we're talking about this, and that is, let's not smudge Gilbert Mudge.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
He'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, he should appreciate it. If he doesn't, I'm going to withdraw it. Yeah. So I did some research about 501c3s and TEFRA and things like that, and my conclusion is that it takes a battery of Philadelphia lawyers to work through it. And everyone who touches something like this ought to have what's called bond counsel. I suspect that Gura Gita has bond counsel, although I don't know who or what it is. But if we don't, you know, we're tiptoeing into a minefield with a blindfold on, with our fingers in my ears, so that we won't be frightened by the explosions. So as far as TEFRA is concerned, TEFRA basically deals with Medicare and Medicaid and reimbursements for hospitals under Medicare and Medicaid. However, there is a TEFRA hearing requirement in the issuance of these bonds, of these 501c3 bonds, and it's like this. Federal law requires that a public TEFRA hearing be held at least 14 days after the giving of published notice apprising the community of a proposed 501c3 bond and the nature and location of the project. Now, I don't know if that notice was ever published or not. I pay attention to these things every day because I'm always trying to catch somebody violating public law 3436. But I don't ever recall seeing this. But according to my research here, federal law requires that a public TEFRA hearing be held at least 14 days after giving of public notice apprising the community of a proposed 501c3 bond and the nature and location of the project. So this is the way I read it. Day number 1. Attention, you guys. We're considering issuing a 501c3 bond We're going to do it for Guam Memorial Hospital, and here's kind of what it's about. And we're going to have a hearing in a couple of weeks. On day 15, you publish a notice a little bit more artfully done than the one that I just read, telling people about the hearing. Now, it looks to me like a two-step process here. Following such public hearing, both the issuer and an appropriate elected official or legislative body with jurisdiction over the project must approve the bond. Now, we're proceeding on the basis that the governor has the authority to approve the bond. I haven't researched that. Could be, maybe it is, maybe it is. If it isn't, then I would expect somebody over at the legislature to speak up. This article that I have here states that states frequently require additional procedural steps prior to the issuance of a bond. Most bonds in the state of Georgia, as an example, must be judicially validated in a proceeding to which the state, the issuer, and the nonprofit are parties. Another public notice must be published in advance of this proceeding. Both the TEFRA and the state procedures affect the closing date. In connection with the closing of the transaction, an information report providing details of the 501c3 bond, the issuer, the nonprofit, and the project must be filed with the Internal Revenue Service. So here's what I know about this so far. I don't know enough about it. I don't know enough about it to decide whether it's a good deal or a bad deal. We've heard snippets of information from smart guys, Simon and and Pete Scrow, but once upon a time I wrote a letter to the legislature saying, show me. I pretended I was from Missouri. You know what the state motto of Missouri is, Jose?
It's the show me state.
It's the show me state. So, I'm going to pretend again that I'm from Missouri, and I'd like to see a whole lot more details on this. I'd like to know who the prime movers are in both of these nonprofits. I would really appreciate knowing why we have to have one nonprofit owning another nonprofit that now owns GRMC. They are private companies. It is a free country. They can kind of do whatever they want until they come to a government agency and say, we want you to give us some goodies. And I kind of moved around a little bit more toward Mike San Nicolas's position. And Mike San Nicolas is saying, if we're going to give somebody like this, something like this, we ought to know more about it. He doesn't go into it as deeply as I'm going into it now. He's just saying, when we give something of value away, we ought to know a lot more about it. And I was talking with a friend, and I came up with this analogy to kind of explain it. Let's say that there are half dozen kids that live in my neighborhood, and they're all hanging around my house. And let's say I've got a tub of ice cream and a really nice set of waffle cones in my house. So one day when the kids are all playing around out in front, I come out and give one of the kids a really nice ice cream cone. I didn't have to give it to him. I just gave it to him from the goodness of my heart. But the other five kids are saying, I wonder why he gave it to that kid and not to any of the others of us. What did that kid do that set him apart from everyone else? In other words, when you do something good for somebody, the natural reaction of the folks out there in the peanut gallery like me are to turn around and say, cui bono? Who benefits? And that's how I'm labeling this whole exercise, cui bono. And there probably is a sound argument that we all benefit by the $600 million bond issue that ultimately fleshes out GRMC, because, we all benefit by having another hospital in town, a private profit-making hospital. We all benefit from it. But somebody needs to make these arguments. Somebody needs to make these explanations. and no one has so far. Now, according to what I just told you, with these notice requirements, Gita had plenty of time to sell this. You know, they should have sold it the way Rory sells his smudge campaign, smear campaign against Joanne Brown. You know, so far he hasn't done anything, but he's probably gotten about 25 inches of earned media. Well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to write here.
Have you seen the latest poll?
Yeah, so Gita should have done the same thing. They should have come up and said, the Gita board is contemplating a 501c3 bond. This is what it's all about.
It's pretty big news.
It's really big.
You would think.
Yeah, it's really big news. It's not we issued a $600 million bond, but it's not going to come back to bite us. Next item on a resolution commending Jack McClukenbach on his retirement from Gita. Yeah, that's more important. Yeah, so not very well handled by Gita. Not very well handled by GRMC, nor by the two nonprofits, but we can't really hold them to account. They're not government agencies. They don't have to do anything more than what they have to do to be successful, and apparently they did enough because they were successful. Now, the governor has to sign, or the legislature has to approve, or one or the other or both. So the game's not over yet, but I really would appreciate much more clarity in this whole thing. And I can't discuss this again without using the T word, transparency. You know, if Gita had put all of the important documents on their website and said, this is what we're going to do. If you guys want to take a gander at it, here's how you could find it. As it just came out of nowhere. It was just a huge surprise to everybody, even me, who does a pretty diligent job of scanning the paper every day. So I'm going to keep watching this thing very closely. Okay, let's take a short break here, and we'll go to Glencoe versus Kenosha.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
All right, so here we are, a few more minutes until the big halftime show coming up here. Don't forget, you can call us here at 671-888-8255. Yeah. How many times a day, Jose, do you get that snotty lady on the phone saying, you got to dial 671?
It's hit me a couple times.
Yeah. Another example of our national government in action. They got to get right down to the local area code level. Okay, I spent some time on A Tale of Two Juries yesterday, and there's a critic here, a guy named Jeffrey Abramson, who's obviously a lawyer, who criticized the way the Kenosha trial was handled because the judge didn't spend enough time picking a jury. He spent 1 day picking a jury. Whereas in the Arbery matter, it took 11 days to pick the jury. And
I've never been a part of a jury or sat in a case that it required a jury, but doesn't it take both the prosecutor and the defense to choose a jury, not just the judge?
they both have a role. So you have what's called a panel of veneerment, and there is something called voir dire, where some judges will allow the counsel to ask the potential jurors questions, others don't. Jurors fill out questionnaires before they start. Some people are sorted out already. If you know some of the parties, et cetera, know the lawyers, you're already sorted out. So when the prospective juror testifies and it appears that he's already decided how the case should go, counsel can challenge for cause. If for instance, the prospective juror says, my grandfather was a cop, and I ain't never seen a situation where the cops was wrong. I don't think I'm going to start now. When you got a police officer on trial, challenge for cause, he's out of there. Yeah. So there are challenges for cause, and then there are also peremptory challenges, where each side has, I can't remember how many it is here. It's either 3 or 6. I think it's 6. Each side has 3 or 6 peremptory challenges where counsel doesn't have to indicate why he doesn't want that person on the jury. He's out. And of course, in the Democrat South, for a long, long time, the peremptory challenges were used to remove African Americans from the jury pool. So, that pretty much guaranteed a primarily white jury, which brought in a lot. A lot of folks would say this is why there were a lot of not guilty verdicts in the South. But there's a Supreme Court case called Batson versus Kentucky, and a judge has a responsibility to make sure that counsel doesn't use peremptory challenges on a racial basis. So I would advance that in face of what Mr. Abrams has said here, even though in the Georgia case, 11 of the 12 jurors were white, 1 African American. Given Batson versus Kentucky, I suspect that there was no systematic exclusion of black jurors from the trial. I'm kind of guessing there, but that'd be my suspicion. Now, in the Kenosha trial, the judge betrayed hostility to the state by instructing prosecutors not even to refer to the 3 people Rittenhouse shot as victims. We have no way of knowing whether the jury would have felt differently about Rittenhouse's actions if the victims had been properly identified as such. Well, that's not much of an argument. A judge has a responsibility to make sure that none of the language used is prejudicial to the defendant. And you can't be a victim if someone did something innocently. I was driving down the highway, and I was maintaining a proper lookout, doing everything that I was supposed to do, when my brakes failed and I ran into the car in front of me. The judge says, "How badly was the victim hurt?" Well, there's no victim. Yeah, so I think the judge was exactly right on that. And the next little criticism. In the Kenosha trial, the jury never got to decide whether Rittenhouse, who was 17 and a minor when he came to the rally carrying a military assault rifle, was guilty of violating Wisconsin law prohibiting minors from possessing firearms, because there was no such law. The judge tossed that charge, accepting a hyper-technical argument from the defense that the restriction on minors did not apply to long rifles for hunting.
Hyper? It's plain as day.
Yeah, and then long does not apply to long rifles for hunting. Now guess who added the for hunting in there?
The author.
Yeah, not the statute. He says, but of course an AR-15 style rifle is not a long hunting rifle. Had the illegal possession charge been presented to the jurors, they may have understood why Rittenhouse was the initial aggressor when he came to the demonstrations heavily and illegally armed, and hence less entitled to argue self-defense. Well, it just shows me the judge made the right decision. What this guy is saying is you should let the jury decide legal questions, which is a complete misunderstanding of how the system works.
This is an attorney writing this?
Well, I'm saying he probably is, yeah. In the Arbery trial, cell phone video showed that the victim was clearly unarmed. In Kenosha, the one victim who survived testified that he was armed and went chasing after Rittenhouse. The prosecution seemed taken by surprise when its own witness buttressed Rittenhouse's self-defense claim. In addition, other witnesses supported Rittenhouse's claim that one of the two men he fatally shot had chased after him, threatening to grab his gun and acting erratically. By contrast to the evidence that arguably supported Rittenhouse's self-defense claim, the prosecution in the Arbery trial demolished one defendant's claim that Arbery sought to seize his gun. So in other words, there's a poor performance on the part of the prosecutor here. This goes to show you that the trial is unfair. Yeah. The prosecutor got McMichael to admit that Arbery had not brandished the gun but just run, and yet McMichael shot him twice, missing a third time. The video established beyond a shadow of a doubt that McMichael had no need to use deadly force against an unarmed man. That's not the standard beyond a shadow of a doubt, except in TV serials. The difference between the Arbery convictions and the Rittenhouse acquittal fits with what jury scholars call liberation hypothesis. When the evidence is strong as it was in Arbery, a jury's own political leanings do not matter and the evidence determines the verdict. But when the evidence is borderline as it was in Rittenhouse trial, jurors are liberated to decide on the basis of their own sentiments and values. So, you know, the left keeps retrying both cases over and over again and just cannot get on the right side of the possibility that there were two criminal jury trials, each of which reached the right verdict in accordance with the law. You know, the Rittenhouse trial had to be wrong, and the Arbery trial, well, yeah, but, you know, that's just one. How about all the years and years and years of bad trials that we've had to go through? So let me see. I don't have a stack today, so I've got somebody on the phone, but Jose's not telling me who it is. Kellis. It's Kellis. Good afternoon, Kellis.
I am blessed. How are you today, Judge?
Good.
So I have a question. So the prosecution witness against Kyle, who admitted that he had a gun, aimed it at him, threatened to shoot it, kill him.
Yeah.
Has he been charged, or was he lawfully carrying the firearm?
You know, that's a really good question. One would think that he committed some crimes himself, right?
Because if I remember right, wasn't he? I'm not sure. I know that he was a felon.
Yeah, all three of them were felons.
Yeah. So in other words, I don't think he was even actually allowed to be in possession of a firearm, let alone carrying it in the middle of a riot or, a peaceful demonstration. And then, even though it was a peaceful demonstration and he was peacefully aiming it at someone, but since he didn't pull the trigger, so that's my other question is, should he have been shot since he actually did not shoot Kyle? Because that was what the prosecution said.
Yeah, Kyle should have just kind of taken it in his
like
stride.
a man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
So
good. That's a good point.
But I haven't not heard anything about this witness, that was, I'm sorry, no, not the witness, the victim, who was in an innocent, peaceful demonstration that was lawfully aiming a weapon and lawfully threatening someone. So, I guess there is no crime.
One would think so. Yeah.
Maybe that's it. That's where I'm getting confused, because Kyle was not, he was the white supremacist vigilante that went out to kill all these black people.
That's all you need. Gotta go, Killis. Good call.
Okay. Bye.
Great point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Omicron arrives on Jack Callahan, Fox News. The first case of the new variant in the U.S. confirmed Wednesday.
An unidentified resident of San Francisco who flew back from South Africa on November 22nd, developed symptoms on November 25th, and tested positive on November 29th. Because of their travel history, the virus sample was immediately tested and confirmed as Omicron. Here's the San Francisco health director.
They had received a full dose of the Moderna vaccine, but no booster. They had mild symptoms and thankfully have now recovered. Contacts have and are being notified by the health department.
And so far, none of those contacts has tested positive.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. President Biden will speak Thursday about the new variant and is expected to continue his order that face masks be worn on planes, trains, and buses and at airports and bus and train stations until mid-March. Vaccine mandates could be a factor as Congress wrestles with a possible government shutdown before the end of the week.
With government funding set to expire Friday at midnight, the House Freedom Caucus is asking Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell to block, quote, timely passage of the spending bill unless it defunds vaccine mandates. Texas GOP Congressman Chip Roy tells Fox's Shannon Bream.
Why would we fund bureaucrats to go after our constituents?
Still, some Senate Republicans are signaling there is no appetite for a shutdown, as Democrats like Virginia Congressman Don Beyer are accusing some Republicans of wanting a shutdown to undermine vaccine efforts.
Fox's Sean Lanchill in Washington. A St. Louis County, Missouri police officer is dead after investigators say a suspect in a drug investigation collided head-on with Detective Antonio Valentine's car.
Obviously, it's a very sad day for this department to lose an officer.
Acting St. Louis County Police Chief Kenneth Gregory says another officer in the car was also hurt. The suspect died from injuries he suffered in the crash. America is listening to Fox News.
As we celebrate this holiday season, we reflect on the hardships of the past 2 years and remain grateful for the family and friends who share our journey and lighten our burdens. The team at Security Title is proud of the work we do to support ourselves and our families, to serve and care for our customers, and to give back to our community. May this season of joy and the new year bring happiness, good health, and prosperity to you and yours. Merry Christmas from all of us at Security Title.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
15-year-old Ethan Crumbly has now been charged as an adult in Tuesday's high school shootings in Oxford, Michigan.
We are charging this individual with 1 count of terrorism causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with intent to murder, and 12 counts of possession of a firearm and the commission of a felony.
Oakland County, Michigan prosecutor Karen McDonald also called for tougher gun laws. A 17-year-old boy died Wednesday from the injuries he suffered in Tuesday's shooting. The House panel investigating what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th has voted to pursue contempt charges against Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official who'd previously refused to answer the committee's questions. The committee, however, has agreed to let Clark come back for another try. Committee Chairman Benny Thompson says they've received word from Clark's lawyers that he wants to instead invoke his Fifth Amendment rights not to incriminate himself. While sales numbers from Black Friday and Cyber Monday were lower than last year's, organizers for Giving Tuesday says Americans shattered last year's record with $2.7 billion in donations this year. That's $200 million more than was given in 2020. For the first time since 1994, the players' strike that year, there's a work stoppage in Major League Baseball. The owners locking out the players.
This is after the MLB Players Association and league officials failed to reach a deal on a new collective bargaining agreement. Both sides met for just 7 minutes before talks ended abruptly Wednesday afternoon, capping off 3 days of discussions in the 0 hour with little to no progress on a new CBA. League owners seeking to maintain a status quo while the Players Union is putting an emphasis on better revenue sharing and measures on service time for players who enter free agent negotiations. Keep in mind, with this lockout, MLB pitchers and catchers are set to report to spring training February 14th with opening day on March 31st of next year. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 3.99% and up to $50,000. And with the new Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas Loan contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier this year. Equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Afre, my name is Kiona Rivera, student at the University of Guam and recent recipient of the G is for Giving Scholarship. This holiday season, I'm encouraging our island community to support the G is for Giving campaign. Your generous contribution not only support programs at the university, but also helps students like me reach our academic goals. For more information on how you can help shape the future leaders of our island, call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 671-735-2957 or visit our website at give.uog.edu.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Okay, so here we are after that big halftime show that we all really, really like so much that gets better and better every day. I've got a case or an item on the card, Waukesha versus Kenosha. But before I get in there, I think I'll do CNN versus Waukesha. It's short, easy. A week had passed since the horrific mass murder in Wisconsin, and CNN is still being dishonest. What do you mean, still being dishonest? Was it ever anything but dishonest? Now the left-wing network is being trashed on social media for blaming a vehicle for the Waukesha Christmas parade massacre instead of the repeat felon who planned the deadly assault. On Sunday, CNN duplicitously insinuated that, quote, a car was the cause of 6 deaths and 62 people being injured, including 18 children. They crafted a misleading tweet that read, Waukesha will hold a moment of silence today, marking 1 week since a car drove through a city Christmas parade, killing 6 people and injuring scores of others. In the original article, CNN's writer did not mention Darrell Brooks, a suspect charged with 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, until the final paragraph. So there are several Twitter participants that chimed in on it. Thankfully, after being trashed, the failing outlet walked back its deceptive headline, changing it to Waukesha will hold a moment of silence Sunday, 1 week after a man plowed a vehicle through a Christmas parade. CNN isn't just the first corporate entity to run false narrative blaming a vehicle for the malicious attack, despite knowing that ex-convict and black nationalist Darrell Brooks is criminally charged for the deaths. On Thanksgiving, the Washington Post ran a clever headline, quote, here's what we know so far on the sequence of events that led to the Waukesha tragedy caused by an SUV. Caused by an SUV. I just wanted to read that once again to kind of set the stage as to where the media cartel is coming from.
There was another headline that I read, but I think they were joking. Could have been from Babylon Bee. That SUV was going through traffic when suddenly a parade stopped right in front of him, and he couldn't avoid him.
Yeah. So he's probably going to sue the parade.
Absolutely.
Organizers of the parade,
How
right?
dare they?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about CNN, you know, CNN really changed the world. Before CNN, the news was a 6 o'clock event.
That was the Iraqi coverage. I think I remember recognizing CNN for the first time when they were doing that.
Yeah.
They had, I think his name was Bernie, embedded in Baghdad or when things were happening, or the Kuwait.
The Kuwait
story.
Yeah, I think it was before that, Jose, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but it's back around 1990. And CNN did something revolutionary. They were on 24 hours a day. Now, up until that time, the news was a 6 o'clock event. Guys like Walter Cronkite, right? And the anchormen were as much the star of the news as whatever happened in the news. So CNN completely changed the formula, and they were on 24 hours a day. So they had 24 hours worth of news holes to fill. So in order to fill all those news holes, they had to go out and cover stuff that had never been covered before on national media. And once they started covering stuff on national media that had never been covered before, clever people out there to see if they could gather earned media started figuring out ways of gaining earned media. So, you know, if you had a demonstration with 20 people in it and you had the camera at the right 45-degree angle at the front of the 40, you know, it looked like you had a huge crowd, etc. So we went from a time when there wasn't a whole lot of news and you could keep up with it by watching the 6 o'clock news every night, to a time when the news is on 24 hours a day. And all kinds of stuff came on the news that had never been on the news before that greatly tended to politicize the country, because what is easier to get on TV than what I'm doing here today, the card, right? So you couple that with the borking of a Supreme Court justice and similar treatment of Clarence Thomas, and you could see how the country became so divided down bipartisan lines. Now, having had a role in the beginning of bringing this phenomenon about, CNN, not so quickly, but quickly enough, decided which side it wanted to be on. It wants to be on the hard left. So anything that happens has got to fit CNN's narrative, even if they have to do stuff that, wouldn't even get past a 10-year-old audience of 10-year-olds saying that, yeah, the car ran over the people. Okay, next we've got Waukesha versus Kenosha, and this is by another one of my favorites, a guy named Victor Davis Hanson, who's right up there with Jonathan Turley when it comes to clearly laying things out in such a manner that he's not just a partisan hack, but a scholar who makes known to you his findings. And this is what he says. The article is cleverly titled, you'd think that maybe Charles Dickens was a co-author here, A Tale of Two Cities, Kenosha versus Waukesha. It was the best of times. It was, Both Wisconsin towns, Kenosha and Waukesha, about 50 miles apart, were recent sites of multiple deaths. The violence in both made national news, and in contradictory ways, both reflected common themes of America's current legal, media, and societal corruption. Legal, media, and societal corruption. The relevant public prosecutors in both were in the news for alleged ideological bias. Specifically, they habitually calibrated the charging, indicting, and trying of defendants through ideological lenses and community pressure rather than the basis of the facts and the law. And of course, that's what the commentators on the left are saying. This is why we do these things, and it's just not working as well as it should. It's not about the accused on trial. It's about the broad societal context that has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed in these trials. Kyle Rittenhouse was a 17-year-old armed youth who volunteered to protect business properties at the height of the August 2020 arson riots. Rittenhouse variously was assaulted, kicked, and had a firearm pointed at him. In reaction, he fatally shot two of his pursuing attackers and wounded a third. Kenosha prosecutors reviewed the videos of the altercations. They saw clearly that Rittenhouse was running away from his assailants. He was variously rushed by one assailant, kicked by another, and struck with a skateboard by still another. Again, a final pursuer pointed a gun at him at close range. No matter. The Kenosha District Attorney's Office charged Rittenhouse with several felonies, including 2 first-degree homicide charges. Well, what choice did he have? The riot was all about a police officer killing an African American.
Wait, over in Kenosha?
Yeah.
He didn't even die.
I'm sorry. Shooting an African American. I fell into that same trap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the riot was all about a police officer shooting an African American. That's all you need to know. You don't need to get into guilt or innocence or anything like that. Just that fact tells you the cop was wrong, right? And should be prosecuted.
That's the narrative.
Yeah. So that being the case, Rittenhouse being at the riot and not on the right side of the riot had to be prosecuted, or we're going to have another riot. The Kenosha District Attorney's Office charged Rittenhouse with several felonies, including 2 first-degree homicide charges. All 4 whom Rittenhouse fired at, whether he missed, wounded, or fatally shot, had lengthy arrest records. 3 were convicted felons. The 4th had a long arrest record. Given the lengthy and quite horrific rap sheet of Rittenhouse's first attacker, Joseph Rosenbaum, including multiple counts of pedophiliac rape, it's difficult to understand why the latter was not in jail. He had been released earlier that day from a mental facility to which he had been committed after a failed suicide attempt. The common denominator to the various prior convictions of his other three assailants was that they should have led to consequences far worse, given that many of their arrest records were dropped, or bail was sometimes waived, or plea bargaining turned serious charges into merely bothersome ones. The release of violent offenders on little or no bail now seems now thematic in Wisconsin. Shortly after August 2020 shootings, the media, Joe Biden, and most of the left-wing commentariat had claimed Rittenhouse was a white supremacist, even though there was no evidence of such a libel then or now. Remember, the Kenosha shootings took place just 9 weeks before the November presidential elections, at a time when the left was framing the incumbent Trump as a white supremacist and Joe Biden as a healer. I'm gonna use that healer. You know, he is indeed a healer. You know, not the kind of healer that makes people feel better, or that cures illnesses. The kind of healer that appears in the phrase ward healer.
Heeler.
And that too, yeah. Yeah, the ward healer who goes around pulling political strings on behalf of his constituents. That's a ward healer. The shootings were immediately declared to be racial. Yet both the shooter, Rittenhouse, and all his attackers who were wounded or killed were white. A fourth assailant, an African American who kicked Rittenhouse while he was on the ground, escaped without injury. What followed in the media was the most egregious example of concocted fiction since the Russian collusion hoax. Rittenhouse was falsely accused of crossing state lines while unlawfully armed with an illegal automatic weapon. In truth, he did not buy the Smith Wesson semi-automatic rifle, much less bring it into nearby Kenosha from nearby Antioch. It was legal for Rittenhouse to possess and use the weapon. The gun itself was not unlawful. He did not purchase it, but had it given by a friend. And Kenosha was his alternate home in that it was where his father and other relatives lived. Rittenhouse then was constructed as a proverbial white supremacist of the sort warned about by the likes of Joe Biden, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley. At various times during the trial, the prosecuting attorneys called Rittenhouse a coward. They claimed he should have faced the pursuing mob of at least a dozen and willingly taken a beating from them face to face, in at least one case at gunpoint. The jury, among other things, was told that the ongoing arson and other violent acts were not serious crimes, and that the three who attacked Rittenhouse were near heroic victims. Protesters outside the courthouse tried to intimidate the defense and jurors. A journalist sought to follow the jury bus, ostensibly to divulge their identities or to intimidate them. PMSNBC was subsequently banned from the courtroom. The pièce de résistance was the lead DA's pointing an empty semi-automatic weapon at the jury with his finger on the trigger, all in the aftermath of Alec Baldwin's accidental shooting with an empty loaded gun of two bystanders on a film set. The DA apparently wished to scare the jury into a guilty verdict through the sensation of having a rifle pointed at them. Given the jury appears post facto to have been made up of reasonable people, that puerile gambit probably backfired. Nice choice of words. When the DA pointed the rifle at the juror with his finger on the trigger, his demonstration backfired. All that the imbecile DA confirmed by his actions was that the same recklessness as those in state and city government who had permitted parts of Kenosha to burn in the first place. There were lots of suicidal prosecutorial stunts such as these in what turned out to be a circus of sorts. The DAs also sought to deprecate the constitutionally protected Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. They bizarrely saw their key witness admitting under cross-examination that he had first pointed a handgun at Kyle Rittenhouse, who then understandably fired at him. And they deliberately released an inferior version of the video record of the shooting to the defense while keeping the superior one to their perceived advantage. So the state's madness raised questions. Were the incompetent DAs simply a window into dysfunctional Kenosha County District Attorney's Office, where bumbling was an institutionalized force multiplier to bias? Were the state prosecutors deliberately inept in order to prompt a mistrial and thus a retrial, second chance of their botched case? Or were they lazily going through the motions to satisfy the mob, but did not really believe Rittenhouse was guilty? Or were they just mediocre, Camry-hungry wannabe celebrities who wished to win cheap media attention for as long as the bewildered judge would put up with their bizarre antics? Very, very insightful on the part of Walter Davis Hanson. A jury unanimously cleared Rittenhouse of all charges. It apparently concluded correctly that if law enforcement and the state either could not or would not protect the lives and property in Kenosha, and if because of that dereliction of duty some citizens stepped in to take up the role that police had utterly abandoned, then as citizens they had the right to defend themselves if attacked by committed violence. I think that's the key. If the cops had been on the job, doing their job, and if Governor of Wisconsin had sent in the right number of National Guardsmen at the beginning, instead of holding them back, nobody probably would have been killed. For some time, media demand has exceeded the available supply of clear-cut cases of white oppressors and black victims. For some time, media demand has exceeded the available supply of clear-cut cases of white oppressors and black victims, at least if the Jussie Smollett hoax, the hands up, don't shoot lie, and the Photoshop pictures and edited tapes of George Zimmerman are any indication. Yet the real reason the left strained to gin up the theme of a white-on-white violence as an example of racism was that their larger agenda of sending a message to middle America: no American in times of riot, arson, and looting should have the right to use firearms to protect their property. That's the message. Riot, looting, arson, etc., you cannot defend yourself. And under no circumstances could a citizen use a gun to ward off those intending to maim or kill him. Had Rittenhouse been found guilty, those no longer would be recourse for citizens living in cities where criminals were freely given the streets. In other words, had a clear-cut case of self-defense morphed into a successful murder conviction, then the most powerful figure in the nation would become the local district attorney. De facto, a DA could empower a mob to loot, burn, steal, and injure by refusing to indict those arrested, even if an increasingly politicized mayor and police chief chose to allow their officers to keep the public safe. We would then, and that's kind of what's going on in Portland, or has been going on in Portland. We would then assume that in this state of nature, anyone protecting property during a riot would be fair game for the mob, given the target would know he could become a convicted felon by defending himself from an attack. So the left understood well the messaging of attacking the open city and undefended town of Kenosha and the conviction of a murderer, Rittenhouse. Accept our political agendas and premises, or otherwise your culpable community will be torn apart with impunity, and any who chose to combat the violence with violence will be charged with capital crimes. Okay, let's take a short break here. Let's head for Wrigley Field, and we'll come back to the criminal SUVs.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hey, let's go to Tango Theaters and watch a movie.
No way, I'm broke. How am I gonna buy snacks?
They have a combo special for the whole month of November called the G is Forgiving Combo Specials. You can choose from 2 combos for just $13.75. G Combo 1 with a drink, popcorn, and candy, or G Combo 2 with a drink, hot dog, and chips.
Wow, okay, that sounds good.
A portion of the proceeds will be donated to the UOG Endowment Foundations for scholarships and programs.
Cool, it'll be my treat. I'll buy 2 combos.
Visit Tango Theaters and grab yourself a G Combo special during the whole month of November.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR, 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
Seventh inning stretch in Wrigley Field in Chicago, world's most beautiful ballpark. And you remember the title of this article was A Tale of Two Cities, Kenosha versus Waukesha. So we spent some time talking about Kenosha, and I have maintained from the get-go that Rittenhouse should not have been charged, and Rittenhouse, of course, could not be found guilty because he was defending himself. And the fact that he was in Kenosha to help his friends defend their property is righteous. There are those who would say, well, if he had just stayed home, nobody would have been killed. Well, I suppose that's correct, but so what? So Rittenhouse lived in Antioch with his mother. His father lived in Kenosha. They were divorced. He spent a lot of time with his father. He had a job in Kenosha working at a swimming pool. After he got off work that day, he stayed in Kenosha because a friend of his asked him to help protect his auto lot, which had been burned the night before. Rittenhouse owned a Smith & Wesson rifle that he kept in Kenosha at a friend's house. He had a legal right to carry it under Wisconsin law. He may not like Wisconsin law, but Wisconsin law is what it is. So he had a right to carry it. And when people attempted to hurt him or kill him, he had a right to defend himself. It's all very, very simple. But what the left did is it took each one of those points and twisted it or reinterpreted it or tried to make something out of it that it wasn't to cast Rittenhouse in a bad light. He crossed state lines to participate in a riot. Well, of course he didn't. But even if he had. So what? I mentioned a little earlier on the show, Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia, where the state line between Virginia and Tennessee is the main street of the two cities. So if you're in Bristol, when I was there, you know, I probably crossed the state line 7 or 8 times just looking for a place to eat. How bad was that?
Guilty.
Yeah.
He also had an AR-15.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and of course he didn't. He had a gun that looked like an AR-15, which is, you know, like waving a red flag in front of a bull if you're on the left. You just can't stand the sight of those rifles. But when you scrape the paint and varnish off them, they're just semi-automatic rifles, like the 30-30 Uncle Henry used to take up to Hurley to go deer hunting. It really isn't a whole lot of difference between them. So they did that, and then they did everything they could to cast Rittenhouse in a bad light. And of course it was racial, because what I call a riot, the others call a peaceful demonstration, and we'll never forget the CNN news story with a burning building in the back and the chyron that said mostly peaceful demonstration.
Now, see, that's the other thing. They called those group of rioters demonstrators.
Yeah.
And Kyle Rittenhouse automatically becomes a vigilante.
Of course.
But he did nothing that a vigilante would do.
No.
Nothing.
Nothing. So he defends himself. The evidence is overwhelming that what happened was self-defense. But, of course, the left can't let it go for the reasons that Victor Davis Hanson here pointed out, that they could have won a big one. They could have won the game where everyone would be afraid to protect his property when the Black Lives Matter folks were having a riot, peaceful demonstration in their hometowns. Okay, so that's Kenosha. We go from Kenosha now to those criminal SUVs. Not long after one Rittenhouse was acquitted, one Darrell Brooks Jr., an African-American with a 20-year record of serious felonies, allegedly drove his car deliberately into a Christmas parade in Waukesha, killing 6 innocents and injuring over 60. Unlike the dishonest media reaction lying about Rittenhouse, who had no criminal record, there was initial careful restraint not to identify the career criminal Brooks as the murderous driver who weaponized his vehicle against parade goers. Despite firsthand accounts from bystanders that the lethal driver was an African-American with dreadlocks, the media, feigning unaccustomed professionalism, in this instance withheld rush-to-judgment identification and culpability. Joe Biden, for a moment, was commendably quiet and editorializing about the racial motivations or ideology of a suspect. For a while, the media ran with its own concocted rumor that Brooks merely was fleeing from an altercation and apparently had mistakenly turned the wrong way into a crowd, despite videos showing the driver deliberately ramming through street barriers repeatedly to seek out targets. Intent likely explains why he killed and injured so many innocents. He was driving after them. Finally, the news settled into the present narrative of a car crash, as if a driverless vehicle on autopilot had simply bumped into various people in the street before burying the murderers altogether on their back pages and dropping the crime from the evening news. Or, as the WAPO put it, here's what we know so far in the sequence of events that led to the Waukesha tragedy caused by an SUV. Yeah, I wonder if Ray Topaznia runs training sessions for these folks so they can do all this stuff with a straight face. The media-generated ruse continued even when details of Brooks' lengthy felony record were finally released. At the time he was mowing down strangers, he had 5 open arrest charges, including 2 felonies. Brooks had been released on a $1,000 bail just 2 days earlier, in another eerie coincidence, after being arrested for attempting to run over a woman and her child. The same MO reified at the Waukesha Christmas slaughter. An alien from Mars who examined Brooks' life of crime, his recent violence, and the case with which he was serially let loose upon the public might have concluded some sort of, quote, privilege as the cause of exemption. Brooks posed on social media as an incompetent but narcissistic rapper. He left a video trail not just of his mediocre recordings, but of clear evidence of virulent anti-Semitism and anti-white racism. So when we start back knocking white people TF out of iron, want to hear it. The old white people knocked them TF out, period. Yeah. As pundits strain to deny any connection between the climate of BLM anger over the Rittenhouse verdict and Brooks' murders, Brooks' own testimonies point to a connection, at least in the sense of hating people on the basis of their race. Indeed, regional Milwaukee BLM activist Vaughn Mays quickly alleged that Rittenhouse acquittal had earned the homicidal payback. Now, that's really something. Rittenhouse, there's a not guilty verdict in Rittenhouse case in Kenosha because he used self-defense and he killed two white guys and ended a third one. And in order to extract the necessary revenge, a black guy named Brooks has to plow through a parade and kill 6 people and injure a dozen. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Shea, could you come on the air and tell us why you support Black Lives Matter? Remember White Coats for Black Lives Matter down at Skinner Plaza, Doc? And what was the governor's daughter's name?
Mariana.
Mariana, yeah, Mariana. You guys want to come forward now and tell us all the wonderful things about Black Lives Matter that caused you to engage in that demonstration? A low-level Democrat functionary tweeted that the dead children of Waukesha were proper Carmen for Rittenhouse walking free. I'm sad anyone dies. I just believe in karma, and this came around quick on the citizens of Wisconsin. Wow. Or as Mays further elaborated, Brooks was an insurrectionist whose violence had jump-started a supposed revolution, his apparent euphemism for mass murder. But it sounds possible that the revolution has started in Wisconsin. It started with this Christmas parade.
Wow.
Yeah. Brooks is, for a while, in jail. Yet for some crazy reason, he can be freed on a $5 million bond. Now, how long will it take the elites of Hollywood to raise the bond? How much will Kamala Harris contribute to bail out this guy, bail out Brooks? The Milwaukee County District Attorney, John Chisholm, is a controversial former DA whose campaigns have been funded in part by the George Soros conglomerate. Surprise, surprise. Creepier still, in the past, a prescient Chisholm has boasted about his own future to the Milwaukee Sentinel, namely that his prosecutorial and bail policies would eventually release career criminals into the streets who would inevitably kill some innocents. Yet he riffed that such carnage was acceptable collateral damage from his decriminalization agendas. Quote, Is there going to be an individual I divert or I put into a treatment program who's going to go out and kill somebody? You bet. Guaranteed. It's guaranteed to happen. It does not invalidate the overall approach. Tell that to the people that got killed. One wonders whether Chisholm will take that argument to the families of the Waukesha deceased, that the loss of their loved ones was a reasonable sacrifice to ensure that misunderstood 20-year criminals like Darrell Brooks Jr. were not kept behind bars. So what are we left with from these horrors of two cities? In Kenosha, the media and the left ginned up race when there was no such component in the trial. But in Waukesha, they perpetuated racial arson and smothered the truth. That is, they kept largely silent when there clearly was racial hatred, given Brooks' own record of anti-white and anti-Semitic venom. Again, the media can turn from creation to suppression on a dime, given the common theme of ginning up racial strife and hatred. Let's head for Churchill Downs, Jose.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch at Tall Tales. I've got the most dangerous man in the airwaves waiting in the green room for me to finish up with this one. So if you are an R. Carl fan, you want to make sure you hang on. So I left for the break with this last sentence. So what are we left with from these two horrors so what are we left with from these horrors of two cities? This is Victor Davis Hanson. In Kenosha, the media and the left ginned up race when there was no such component in the trial. But in Waukesha, they perpetuated racial arson and smothered the truth. That is, they kept largely silent when there was clearly racial hatred, etc. And amoral media and left so far have kept an inconvenient Waukesha car crash out of the mainstream news, reversing their sensational obsessions with Kenosha. After all, in their unhinged, radicalized worldview, the demonization of a 17-year-old white male who shot 3 other white males still could be squeezed for racial juice given the larger contextual landscape of a riot over police wounding of an African-American male. The shooting of Jacob Blake that set off Kenosha riots was later determined to be justified, given the armed suspect was heading towards his car after fighting with police, who were called to the residence to protect a woman at a restraining order against the career violent felon. In sum, Rittenhouse had no criminal record. All 4 of his assailants had lengthy arrest records, 3 of whom were ex-felons. He had no record of racial hatred of which he was accused. In contrast, Brooks was an abject, violent racist whom the media sought to shield, and he was a career felon who both long ago and quite recently should have been kept behind bars so that he would not murder innocents. How a Wisconsin ex-felon received a $1,000 bail bond and freedom to mow down innocents after trying to run down two with his car, while another juvenile without an arrest record with good grounds to claim self-defense was required to post a $2 million bond and so stayed incarcerated pending charges without running water in his cell for 87 days. He was in jail 87 days awaiting trial, which is another story in itself. Rittenhouse should never have been charged. Brooks should never have been out of jail. The effort to make a former beneficiary of white supremacy and the latter a victim of it required a level of amoral media deceit that finally was unsustainable even in this bankrupt age. Amoral media deceit. Let's make a note of that phrase, Jose. Amoral media deceit. Carl, what can you tell us about amoral media deceit?
I'm not sure I can add much to that. On that topic, I just wanted to call in to express the view that the man that was driving that self-driving vehicle, he's kind of of course he's a victimizer. He ran over many people. He did injury to over 50 people, killed 6. But in a way, he's kind of a victim too. I'm just thinking of all the years of I'm trying to think of the word propaganda that had been pumped into his brain to hold that kind of hatred. And the instigators of this are scot-free. They're nowhere to be found. When Marx conceived of his version of socialism, he made some really big predictions. One of them, was the worldwide revolution of the working class to bloody revolution to take over all means of production from the wealthy, the owner class. And of course that didn't happen. But after the Russian Revolution, the Soviets, the year after the end of the Bolshevik Revolution, I think this was even during the Bolshevik Revolution, they already had plans to spread the communism around the world. And
that was the Trotskyites, the Trotsky theory. Lenin had a different view, but that was Trotsky. That was the reason they had their falling out. But go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, and Lenin, he and others, I think, understood that Marx was wrong in his thinking that this worldwide revolution was inevitable. It was just would be an inevitable outcome of history, this historic clash of conflict between these classes, and it would, you didn't need to do anything for it to happen. It would have inevitably come. And I think Lenin was smart enough to figure out that no, this was not going to happen. They couldn't passively just wait for the revolution. And I think Lenin's innovation, or one of his innovations to Marxism, was the idea that there needed to be a professional agitator class, continually pumping out agitprop or agitation propaganda, constantly goading the public and growing resentment toward the present government system. And I think this guy, Mr. I guess is Brooks, I think his name is, I think he is a product of that, that this agitation propaganda, and that the black community was a very big target of the communists for decades, and it failed eventually. I think they eventually threw up their hands. What they wanted to do was drive so much resentment in the black community that it caused a revolution within America and broke America in two, just like it did in Korea and Vietnam for a while. But what happened is that the agitators actually came from our own universities, and they've been very successful in infiltrating the black community and unfortunately causing tremendous amount of damage. And we're seeing that now, in this guy. It's really unfortunate. But we have our own examples here locally. We have agitation propaganda and speeches and opinion pieces being cranked out with the idea of growing resentment toward America and toward the military, toward white people. So we're still seeing this going on. This professional agitator class, across America and on Guam as well. Anyway, I just wanted to toss in those few thoughts about that.
Okay, well, you're right on the money, Carl. And what we're seeing here is, the participants, guys like this Brooks, they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand that they're useful idiots, that they're playing a role and dancing to a tune that somebody else is playing. But it's right here. It's critical race theory. It's neo-Marxism, cultural Marxism, the Frankfurt School. It's all happening right in front of our eyes, and an awful lot of people don't understand. They don't recognize what's going on. But thanks a lot for calling, Carl.
Yeah, just one quick comment. One of the most important things I've heard or read was from David Horowitz, and that's the comment that the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. And, it doesn't matter if the issue is racism, if it's sexism, if it's ethnic division, if it's climate change, you name it. The end goal is always that
about
revolution.
Culture?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Indigenous rights, those are all leverage points and tools to drive resentment. But the end goal is always that revolution. The revolution is the destruction of capitalist America and the replacement of it by a socialist/communist America. And most of the people now, the vast majority of people involved in this don't realize they're being used. But that is the fact that they're being used to reach an end point, and that is it. Anyway, that's my 2 bits for today, Bob. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll give you a nickel's worth of change on that one, Carl. Thanks again for calling. Okay, so we're down. We got about 4 minutes to go. I wanted to read some of the Facebook posts. I noticed there was a pretty good argument going on Facebook. Unfortunately, a lot of the initial posts don't show up on my screen. Why is that, Jose? Is there some way I can go back to the very beginning?
I don't know why that does that. It's kind of aggravating. I can usually pick it up on a browser, but not on my phone. So yeah, I lost those also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started out with Bonnie Suba. And then James Art says liberals are hypocrites. It's all about coercion. I think he was probably talking about Lou and masks and stuff like that. And Sarita Garin, oh boy, we are still on red rice. Well, I want to make a point there. The point is, if you want to play that game, Pacific Daily News, Therese Padua Howe, we'll do that for a while if that's what you really want to do. And let's see, we got David Dinsman, Delta Omicron. Pam Duvall is sad because she missed the workup on red rice. It's a really important issue. And then, Jose, you jump in and defend me. You say, Bob is correct. Why? 2 words, Max Havoc.
You're talking about, we need to know a little bit more about what Gita is getting itself into.
Like Max Havoc.
I mean, even though that was taxpayer money being used and not in this case, it still affected our island.
Yeah. Yeah, where we pissed a lot of money away being movie producers when, boy, was...
Something that was really packaged nicely on the outside.
Yeah. And was the title of that movie ever appropriate? Max Havoc. It was indeed Max Havoc. Yeah. All right, let's see. We got, I guess that's it for today. So we'll be back tomorrow for our least favorite day of the week, but by gosh, we're going to be here and we're going to enjoy every single minute of it. We'll see you then. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Countdown to a possible government shutdown. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. There's less than 48 hours until the government's spending authority runs out. Congress scrambling to extend it.
The government is funded through Friday night, but if there's no emergency bill, the government closes. The bill should pass the House, but issues loom in the Senate. That's where conservatives want to slow things down over vaccine mandates. The House Freedom Caucus asked Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell to block, quote, timely passage of the spending bill unless it defunds vaccine mandates. Most GOP members oppose risking government funding.
Fox's Chad Pergram at the Capitol. On top of the spending authority, the government will bump into its debt limit in less than 2 weeks. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen again Wednesday imploring Congress for another debt limit extension.
America must pay its bills on time and in full. If we do not, we will eviscerate our current recovery.
With the first case of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus confirmed in the U.S., President Biden plans to speak about it this afternoon and will likely tighten travel restrictions.
An enhanced plan that will require every traveler entering the country, including returning U.S. citizens, to be tested 1 day before boarding their flight. The rules will also apply to vaccinated travelers who previously were only required to show a negative test no more than 3 days before their flight.
Fox's Kevin Corke reports the president is also expected to continue until mid-March his order mandating face masks on airplanes and other forms of public transportation. Major League Baseball is on hold. The owners locking out the players' union at midnight after failing to make any progress Wednesday toward a new collective bargaining agreement. It's baseball's first work stoppage since the players' strike in 1994 wiped out the entire postseason. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the way. You never know who will drop in. Subscribe now on FoxNewsPodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The Voices America trusts. Download it now.
As tensions continue to rise between Russia and Ukraine, a Russian news agency says 3 suspected Ukrainian intelligence agents have been arrested and accused of planning to carry out a bomb attack. The U.S. State Department issuing a warning.
Russia is putting in place the capacity to invade Ukraine. That's according to Secretary Blinken, who warned them to back down.
We urge Russia to de-escalate, to reverse the recent troop buildup.
Meeting with other NATO ministers in Latvia to discuss the growing threat, Blinken also warned Russia that if it invades, the U.S. is prepared to impose severe